Okay, so we're going to create our CO2 grid drawings. And I have my CO2 cutouts. This is my front view and this is my top view. My front view is 7 squares tall, which is 1 3/4 inches tall. And my top view is 6 squares tall, which is 1.5 inches tall. I want to center those on this sheet really well. And so the idea is that you would want these centered horizontally, and then you would want a space equal here, here, and here on this drawing. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to take my front view and I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to mark that center line. Then I'm going to take the center of this 11-inch piece of paper. Each square is 1/4 inch, so halfway would be 22 squares. The full length is 44, so half of that would make 22. And right here, that is my halfway mark. Now, the height of this and the height of this added together is 13 squares, okay? And this is 8.5 inches tall, all right? 8.5 inches at 1/4 inch per square would be 34 squares. So 34 squares minus the 13 squares that come from our front view and our top view would leave 21 squares where there won't be views. So if I took these two and put them at the bottom, there should be about 21 squares above them. So I want those evenly distributed at the bottom, the middle, and the top. So we can divide 21 into 3, which is 7 squares. So what I want to do is I want to count up 7 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then this right here is 7 squares. So I want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then there's 7 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My top view, which will go here, that is 6 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then what's remaining here should be 7, give or take the half square at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have it perfectly centered. I'm going to take my front view and I'm going to set it so that the center mark on my yellow sheet is centered with the mark I put on my paper. And I'm going to set the bottom of my drawing at the bottom of, at this mark right here. So I'm going to take and I'm going to press my pencil into the paper. At every point where the blue line crosses the texture of the car. So every time I hit a blue line, I'm putting a little point. Now in straight lines, from here to here, we don't need to put a dot at every point. We can just simply put the beginning and ending points. But on curved surfaces, I want very small points at every blue line. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a French curve to connect these dots. This is straight from here to here. All right, so what I would like to do is I'd like to connect the straight lines. And then the remainder of the lines are curved lines. This here is a French curve, And what we want to do is we want to find where on the French curve we find the curves that we want for our car. So what I do is I rotate this around looking for curves that match my points. And what you want to do is you want to get a couple of the points lined up, 2 or 3 points at once. You want to get this smooth as possible from beginning to end of each curve. So you can see that looks like a continuous curve, and I used 2 or 3 different points on the French curve to make that happen. Right here, I'm looking for a point that connects a couple of these points from here to there. And then looks like I got a couple points there. And then finally, this little section here, it looks like I can draw like that. Okay, we want to draw our top view. That's going to be directly above. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the farthest point back on our car. We're going to bring that straight up. And the farthest point forward on our car, we're going to bring that straight up. We're going to take our cutout. Now in the top view, we want it centered. So if your car is not full width, you're going to want to, so what you're going to want to do is, if your car is not the full width of the 6 squares, you want to center it within there. Mine is the full width, so what I'm going to do is bring it all the way to the back line here, and you can see that it's the full width. So if yours does not match up with your front view for length, you draw the back first and then adjust it to make it sure that the 2 views are the same length. So I'm going to place my points for my straight lines. For my curves, I'm going to place points at every blue line. Along these sides that's curved, I'm placing tiny little points at each blue line. Okay, so again, I'm going to start with the straight lines. From here, straight back. Same thing on the top. And then this car tapers to there on both sides. There's a flat spot here that I want to indicate. All right, and so what I have in the front almost looks to me like a circle. So I'm going to see if there's a circle on this circle template that might demonstrate the circle I'm looking for. That looks pretty close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use that. It's a nice circle. All right, and then for the curves on the side, I'm going to use my French curve for that. So I want to find a nice gentle curve, maybe something like that. And whatever I do on one side, I'll do for the other. So once we have the outline done, what we're going to do is we're going to erase any stray marks. Make sure that all we have on here is the lines that are the outlines of our car. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to place my wheels. placement horizontally is really depending on your car. However, a good rule of thumb for the height of your wheel, the center of your wheel should be about a half square above the bottom of your car. Same thing in the rear. The center of your wheel should be a half square up. We're going to use the 1 1/8 circle. And what we need here is we need a center line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the straight edge here. I'm going to draw, this is a center mark. It's long, short, long. And I'm going to do the same thing horizontally. Long, short, long. And then what I can do is I can take my 1 1/8 circle and I can move it into place so that these 4 marks in the corners line up with the marks on the paper. And once I get this marked lined up with that, this mark lined up with here, and so on, I can draw that circle in. I'm going to do the same thing for the rear wheel. Draw my center mark. And then I'm going to use my 1 1/8 circle template for the rubber wheels. Check your wheel dimension sheet if you're using the plastic wheels for the dimensions for these. I'm going to draw the rear wheel. All right, so those are my front view. Now we have to draw the top view wheels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring 3 points up. The center of my wheel, I'm going to bring that straight up, and you can see the blue line on the grid paper. I can follow that up, and I'm going to lightly draw that all the way through my top view. The front and rear edges of my wheel, I'm going to bring those up, but I'm only going to draw a short line there and a short line there. The rear of the wheel, I'm going to draw those, short line here, and same thing on the other side. Now, when you look at the dimension layout sheet, you'll find that the wheels are 3/8 of an inch. So 3/8 of an inch is 1.5 squares. So what I like to do is I like to come out 2 squares, and this point will be the outside edge of the circle of the wheels. And if I go 1.5 squares in, which is the width of the wheel, the inside of the wheel will be right about here, and that leaves a half square space between the wheel and the car, which is what you're looking for. If I show you an example car, you can see that there's typically at least a small gap between the rubber wheel and the car. Next, I'm going to use all that I've used here to make the top view of the wheel. I use the largest circle, which is a 2 1/4 circle, and I want this tick mark down here to line up with the center mark of the circle down here, and this tick mark at the top to line up with the axle. And what I want to do is I want to move that vertically until the top edge of this circle lines up with that tick mark that I just drew. And I'm going to draw from the rear of the wheel to the front of the wheel. And it's going to give me sort of a football shape, just like that. And I'm going to move this circle up, and I'm going to do the same thing, tick mark on the axle. I have this edge lined up with the tick mark that I put there, and I'm going to go from the rear of the wheel across to the front of the wheel. And what you'll find is you'll have a straight spot on the wheel. That straight spot right here and right here is part of the actual wheel design. That is not a mistake. So I'm going to erase the lines, the stray lines that I didn't use. And you can see on these wheels, it's rounded on the front edge, and we're just going to draw that as flat. Okay, so you're going to do that for all 4 wheels. So I'm going to go ahead and draw all 4 wheels. Tick mark 2 away, come back a square and a half. Draw the top edge first. Draw the bottom edge. Draw my axle. Draw my front edge of the wheel up. Small mark, small mark. The rear edge of the wheel. Small mark, small mark. Then I'm going to come out 2 squares, square and a half back, draw the top edge, draw the bottom edge, at the top we're going to draw a tick mark 2 squares out, top. We need a tick mark, bottom edge or inside edge. Okay, so that's what your wheels should look like. I'm going to take a moment to erase my extra lines. Okay, so I have wheels. The next thing I'd like to draw are the hidden lines. Now, a couple of the lines we're going to have to change from visible lines to hidden lines. 2 of the lines are the wheels. The wheels are now covering the bottom edge of that, and we're going to erase those lines and draw in hidden lines. Now, the trick to hidden lines is when you draw these, use the grid lines as markers. So every time I pass a blue hidden line or blue grid line, I make a mark. You can see that I make a plus sign out of that, plus sign out of that, plus sign out of that. Each blue line I put a short dash. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to draw like that, and then on an angle I'm going to finish this. The other ones, I lightly drew my axle lines up here, and when the axle lines go through the wheels and the inside of the car, we need to change those to hidden. But outside here and here, those are still visible. So I'm going to draw in my visible lines first, and then here it's hidden. Inside the car it's hidden, and then again inside the wheel. So it's hidden here, here, and here, but outside the wheels and cars it's still visible. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for our top view. I'm going to erase the light line that I drew. I'm going to make dark visible lines in 4 spaces. And then within the wheels and the car, I'm going to draw hidden lines. there are two other things that we need to draw as hidden lines. The two things are our CO2 cartridge and our wind tunnel hole. The lowest you can put the CO2 cartridge is a square or half square above your axles. So this point right here, the center of my circle, that is where my axle is going to go. And if you go up a half square above that, that's the lowest you can put the CO2 cartridge. I can put it higher than that, the bottom edge of the CO2 cartridge, but I wouldn't want to put it too much higher or it might break through, unless that's your design. So you can see that the CO2 cartridge is pretty big. It's 3 squares wide and 8 squares long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start mine a half square up from the center here, and then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. That's going to be the top edge of my CO2 cartridge. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares in. That's how deep the hole will go in. So I'm going to finish this off with my hidden lines. Also continue those vertically. So that's the front view CO2 cartridge. In the top view, it's the same thing, except that it needs to be centered. So this line right here is the center of my top view. So I want to come down 1.5 squares and up 1.5 squares, and those 2 points make up where my CO2 cartridge is going to go. And then for how deep it goes, I just bring that up from my front view, which will be that deep. So I'm going to go ahead and take my straight edge. Now, straight edges, I'm using a circle template right now. This is a clean circle template. More often than not, though, students would probably want to use a triangle as a straight edge. I'm using this just so I have less tools I need to work with while making this video, but a triangle is really the best tool for this. So those are my hidden lines for my CO2 cartridge. The last thing I want to draw in hidden lines is the hole for the wind tunnel. Each car will have a hole in the bottom, and this hole is centered this way. It's also as close to center as possible this way. However, you have to consider that there's a CO2 cartridge that will go about that deep in. So if you have a longer car, you might be able to get it centered this way, but if you have a shorter car like this one, you might need to put it a little bit ahead of the CO2 cartridge. This hole is 1/4 inch, and it goes in 1/2 inch deep. So what I'm going to do, mine's a mini, so I'm only going to go 1/2 square in front of here. So it's going to go there to there. It's a full square wide, or 1/4 inch, and then it's 2 squares in, or 1/2 inch. Okay, so that's where that's going to be placed. I'm going to get out my straight edge. You may notice that none of the lines I've drawn without a straight edge of some form. Whether it's a circle template or a French curve, every line has been straight with a straight edge or a guide of some form. So that is where that hole's going to go. In the top view, the center will be right there. Now, we're going to use the same method we used for our wheels. We're going to draw the plus sign, and then we're going to add our center marks, which 2 long lines off the center in both directions. Just like that. And I'm going to take a 1/4 inch circle template. Right here's the 1/4 inch mark, and I'm going to line it up so that all 4 marks line up. I'm going to draw the bottom, the top, left, and right in dashes so that we have a hidden circle. And that makes up all of our hidden lines for our car. The next thing I want to do is I want to add center lines. I have 3 center lines that I need to show you. The center marks for the wheels and for the wind tunnel hole, those are all center lines. It's actually 2 center lines. But for anything that I'm looking at the side of a circle, this is a circle in this view, but I'm looking at the side of it in this view. I want to draw as a center mark. So this is the center of that circle that goes into the car there. Same thing for the CO2 hole. Right here is the center of that hole, right in the center of that. And I want to, in this direction, I want to demonstrate that this is the center of that CO2 cartridge. And the top view, we're going to do the same thing. However, you've already see that we've already got a center mark started. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue that across. So I've got a long, I'm going to continue with a short and another long. So it's long, short, and then because this view is symmetrical, I'm going to continue it across the remainder of the drawing. Short, long. In our next video, we will finish with the dimensions.